Hello everyone, and you're all very warm welcome to this tutorial for the PMDG 737-700 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a real-life Boeing 737 pilot and a member of the PMDG tech team. This video is recorded in a beta version of the airplane, so don't be surprised if you see some minor issues popping up. That's all known by PMDG at this moment, and that's also being worked on as we speak. For example, the trim sound is currently one that's still being implemented. So we are picking up where we left off last, with the final CDU pre-flight procedure completed, and we are now starting to prepare our aircraft for pushback. We'll start with the final flight deck preparation and with getting our ATC clearance. Now, if you're flying offline, then just use whichever tool you're using for ATC. If you're flying online, then this would be the moment to contact air traffic control and ask for your IFR clearance. I'm not going to go over the exact phraseology there, because it's different in every country, and especially since we're currently standing in the United Kingdom, where they are doing a lot of things different than the ICAO standards. I'm not going to give you a demo of how to request an IFR clearance here. However, let's just assume we've got our clearance. Then what we are going to do, we'll set the altitude at 4,000 feet. Make sure that we actually have our expected departure routing in here. UTAF upon Romeo, and make sure the squawk is set. And once we have startup approved, we'll also set the transponder to alt off. Alright. So this is about the time to start our APU. Again, as pointed out in an earlier video. Well, we want to start the APU as late as possible to conserve some fuel and to also protect the environment with it. I did receive a comment there that I should keep this bullshit about protecting the environment out of my videos. Now, allow me a small comment on this, please. It is no bullshit. I replied in detail to this comment with a couple of calculations. The difference is just a ground power unit is using anywhere between 4 and 10 liters of diesel per hour, while the APU is using up to 60 kilos. If you're converting that, you end up with savings of something that may not sound a lot. Make it maybe 40 kilos an hour, so in a normal turnaround it's 20 kilos. But keep in mind that there are hundreds of thousands flights a day. So if you're adding that up, you're ending up with a lot of tonnage of saved CO2 emissions here. Now, back to our tutorial. We want to make sure at this point that we are removing all the ground equipment that's still left, except for the ground power. So just go through the pages here, make sure that you're disconnecting anything that is still connected at this point. It does take a little bit of time to get the loaders detached, because they can't leave both at the same time. The APU takes about a minute to start. Once the generator is available, you see the APU gen off bus light. You're going to switch on the APU generator. Once that is on, we can also remove the ground power unit. So that's removing, just waiting for the aft loaders to be able to detach now. Right, they should be gone by now. Let's see. Yep, here we go. And then, once we're absolutely sure that the parking brake is set, we can remove the wheel chocks from the aircraft. Now, there is a pretty cool feature in this PMDG 737 that I just want to talk about briefly. That is, if you go into the FS action and onto the pushback tab, you can select several pushback styles. And there is one among them, among all those defaults you have over here, that's this one, self-drive. If you click that, and you select the tuck down here, then you're able to actually drive the pushback tuck yourself by moving your control column. That's a pretty cool feature that I can only recommend all of you to check out. For this tutorial, however, I'm going to use what's probably the most popular tool for pushbacks, and that is Toolbar Pushback from flightsim.to. I'm going to link that in the description, and I can very much recommend you to check that out if you haven't yet. I'm going to click on Pre-Plan the Pushback. Then it's going to load a map of the airport with our current aircraft location, and we will simply select our expected final location over here, click on enter, and then it's basically preparing everything for us. Now before we are going to start our pushback, we need to run the checklists. And many of you will have noticed that I've been following a specific company's SOP in these tutorials so far. However, for the checklist I'm going to use the standard Boeing checklists that are available in the Quick Reference Handbook. Note that this QRH has been delivered with an older version of the 737 for Flight Simulator X back in the day. So it's a little bit outdated, but that's the best we have available here, since I cannot share any company documents with you. So let's start with the pre-flight checklist. Oxygen, tested 100%, navigation, transfer and display switches, normal and auto, window heat, on, pressurization mode selector, auto, flight instruments, heading 042, altimeter 1013, reading 350. You want to check that on both displays to make sure they agree with each other. Park and brake set, engine start levers cut off. Pre-flight checklist complete. So with this done, we can now request our pushback from toolbar pushback.
Cockpit to ground.
This is ground. Stand by.
While they are connecting the tug, we are going to get our ATC clearance for the pushback. Once that is received, turn the packs off, turn on the APU bleed, turn on the anti-collision light, and make sure the transponder is set to alt off. At this point I'm also going to put on the no smoking sign, or the chime sign as it is here in the PMDG version. That's just a reminder we are using in my company that the cabin is actually seated and ready for the aircraft to move. And over here we have master caution, air conditioning, showing you the dual bleed light. That is totally normal and expected, since you do have two bleed sources available here. If the master caution comes up at this point, do check it, make sure that you don't get any pack light or anything APU related, but if it's just the dual bleed, then you can cancel the master caution.
We are cleared for start and push.
Alright, finally before we are going to release the brake, we're going to run the before start checklist. Flight deck door, closed and locked. Fuel, we have 4,500 kilos on board with 4 pumps on. Passenger signs on, windows, locked. MCP, V2 130, heading 222, altitude 4,000. Takeoff speeds V1 128, VR 128, V2 130. That's set on the MCP as well. CDU pre-flight, complete. Rudder and aileron trims, free and 0. Checking here and here. Taxi and takeoff briefing completed. Anti-collision light on. Before start checklist complete. So,
parking brakes are released.
Commencing pushback. You can start the engines in sequence.
Yeah, we'll start in the sequence.
Alright, with our pushback on our way. As soon as we have passed the line at the end of the gate here, we can start our engine startup sequence. But we'll have to wait until the engines are beyond the line. So while we're waiting, some small words on the engine startup. With the engine start switch to ground, you're monitoring for the N2, with all pressure rising, and the N1. Once the N2 has reached 25%, we're going to put on the fuel, monitor that the valves are operating correctly, and then we're going to monitor the further start sequence. I'm going to show you that now that we're beyond the line. So start engine number 2. N2. Oil pressure. N1. Now we're waiting for 25% N2. Just now. Turn on the fuel, observe the valves in transit, that's the bright blue light, and then in the commander position, that's when the lights are going off. Now we see fuel coming on here.
Please set your parking brake.
Parking brake set. Ground. You may disconnect.
Okay, sir. Clear to disconnect. Pin has been removed. See you at the side. Have a good flight.
Hold in
Right, make
position
sure that
waiting
the
for
TOC is
visual.
driving
Thank you
away.
and goodbye.
If it's been a lift up, so one that lifted your nose wheel up, then observe the lifter going and the ramp agent carrying the pin. If it's been a TOC that used a tow bar, make sure that they are actually carrying the tow bar away. There have been incidences where the tow bar was still connected, and from the flight deck you're unable to see if this tow bar is still connected. So make sure that if it's a TOC that's using a tow bar, that they're actually carrying it away as well. So, we have starter cutout, monitor engine number 2, and in the meantime we're starting engine number 1. So, for the engine to be stable, we're looking at 20% N2, something in the region of 400 degrees EGT, around 60% N2, and a fuel flow of 300 kilos. 2, 4, 6, 3. And the red line, you see it over here currently, has to be removed. So, N2, all press, N1, 25% N2, start number 1, make sure that the engine fuel valve and the wings bar valve are operating. Small word here, this is recorded with a slightly older version of the 737NG. In a future update the engine start is going to be reworked. You're looking at a total start time per engine of something in the region of 42 to 45 seconds. And currently it's taking a little bit longer, but that is something PMDG wants to work on for a future update. Start the cutout, monitor number 1, 2, 4, 6, 3, red line removed, engine number 1 stable. As soon as your engine 1 is stable, you want to turn on the engine generators and turn off the APU. Again, just to conserve a little bit more fuel. It doesn't seem a lot, but if you add up to about 200,000 aircraft flying each day doing several sectors, then you can achieve some considerable carbon emission savings here. Right, at this point, as soon as the dispatcher shows up on the left or right side, depending on where he's going to go, and once you've seen the pin, you can start the before taxi procedure. So make sure the engine generators are on, APU is off, start switches into continuous, turn on the probe heat, set the engine anti-ice and the wing anti-ice as appropriate. I can only again recommend you to check my tutorial on the final CDU preflight procedure where I went over the usage of those. Make sure the packs are on auto, isolation valve auto, APU bleed goes off. Now we're going to set our flaps to the desired flap position. We're requiring flaps 5. Now I'm going to show you a cool procedure. If you click simply on the button, on the number here, there's some hidden buttons implemented, and it's simply going to set the flap lever to the position that you've just clicked on. Monitor the engine displays, making sure that there is nothing out of the ordinary over here. Then you can close the engine display. Now we are going to do our flight control track. Full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral. Rudders. If you have a hardware tiller, make sure to hold your tiller so that the nose wheel is not moving while stationary on the ground. Full left, full right, neutral. We do the recall, and now we can do the before taxi checklist. Generators on, probe heat on, anti-ice off, isolation valve auto, engine start switches continuous, recall checked, auto brake, RTO, engine start levers, idle detent, flight controls checked, and ground equipment clear. Before taxi checklist complete. Now this completes today's tutorial, and I hope to see you all again on the next one when we are going to start our taxi.